Kate and Julia, together, you've actually written a book about the joy of money. And Kate, you have a very successful financial planning company, so successful, in fact, that you're actually not even taking any more clients anymore. And Julia, you've had a long career in financial journalism and related industries. So you've really spent, decades of your career sort of flexing that muscle, I suppose, of being comfortable talking about money. And Julia, I'm interested to hear from you. What was your perception of money when you were younger? Did you always have like a joyful relationship with it, or was it kind of a bit fractured for you at times as well?
Well, funnily enough, when I was younger, I had a much better relationship with money because, as Kate says, in my 20s, I was also saving well, and I kind of had a plan, and I wanted to get a house quite early and get some level of independence. And so I think that with that, you feel comfortable. When you're doing well, you feel comfortable with money. When everything's going to plan, it's all good. I did buy the house many, many years ago when the interest rates were those ridiculous, double figure, like 14.5% and so on. And, I'd work out on a spreadsheet exactly what, 0.25% change would mean to what I had to pay each month. But the other thing is, I studied economics at university, and I understood there was a whole different language about finance. And I think that it's understanding the jargon that goes with money that makes it really complex and lacks joy for a lot of people. So I think what we've tried to do in the book is cut all the jargon and explain the concepts in plain language. And I think when people understand and it's clear, that's when there is joy. Because as Kate said, it is just an enabler to do whatever else it is that you want to do with your life.
I think you touch on a really great point there, that often this concept of money and investing seems overwhelming because we don't necessarily know, what the ASX stands for, or what, the different tickers on the stock exchange stand for, or we don't know what an ETF is. And so, Safia, I want to come to you in just a moment to ask you about your top tips for people who are on this webinar today and who are getting started in their money journey in terms of education and just feeling really empowered to kind of take control to supercharge their success in terms of their financial life. I guess I'm really interested to know, Safia, you deal a lot with women and businesses in your role at Westpac. What are some good baby steps that people can take if they're just feeling overwhelmed by the whole concept and they don't kind of know where to begin? Obviously, you can read the book, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But what other resources are out there? There's obviously Ruby Connection that has a lot of great blogs. Is there anything else, Safia, that you typically recommend people turn to?
Yeah, so from my experience, like the others, I actually started off my financial journey by and quite early on is, I had my family members, obviously my mum and dad, and my mum spent a lot and my dad saved a lot. And so I picked up some really bad habits from my mum. So anything I earned, I spent. So, when I came into banking, and I started off really, really young in the retail network, and I learned really quickly that I need to take control of my finances to really have some security in the future. So I have got some really great tips, which hopefully I'll recommend, but obviously everyone's circumstances are different, and it depends on your life stage. So every life stage is very different, and planning is really important. So if I kind of take a step back, there's some really 3 simple tips which I always live by. And one is really setting that financial goal. So whether it's now or the future, so really those short, medium, or long-term goals. What do you want to achieve and by when? And if you look at, from another point, the second step that I always have is to develop some really positive financial habits. So what I mean by that is not spend every dollar that you make, like I did in my early days. That's my one advice. But also just look at, some of those things and look at your transaction history. And there's some really great tools that you can use. There's budgeting tools that we do offer. Other banks offer this as well. But utilize the tools and the resources that we do have online. And they're at your fingertips, which is fantastic now. We've got more tools, more self-service than we ever had before, which is absolutely exciting. So you can really take that control of your finances and really develop some financial healthy tips and habits as well. The last one is really plan for a better financial future. So, and that's either through advice, and I know Kate and Julia will talk to that, or you can go into your bank and really ask those questions. And I think that preparation and research is really important as well. So my recommendation is, use the tools and the resources available online. It's so fantastic. We've got everything at our fingertips now, so we can go in and ask the right questions. And the two things that I always say, there's the two C's, it's confidence and control. So once you have the confidence doing your research, you can ask the right questions that's best suited for you. The best thing about now with banking, and we've gone through so much challenges in the last few years in particular, that the way that we, talk to our clients and talk to our customers is very different to the way we did back in the 80s and 90s. So it's great that we actually look at the holistic view of a customer's financial situation before making recommendations or providing options. But, do your research beforehand is my advice. Prep for that particular meeting and ask the right questions. But they're the few tips that I have.
They're great tips. And I love that you mentioned confidence, because I know for me, I used to be a journalist. I was a foreign correspondent. And there was a moment in my career where I realized I had this epiphany, similar to you, Kate, had a partner, that didn't work out. And I realized a man is not a plan. I need to get on top of my financial life, because if I don't, no one else will. And so I went down the Google rabbit hole of, all of the different blogs and this, and trying to understand what is compound interest? How do I make shares work for me? All that kind of stuff. And that's a big part actually of why I started PepTalkHer, which is the company I run, which is now focused very much on closing the gender pay gap. Because a big part of the gender pay gap is if we earn less, we have less to invest for our financial future. And Julia and Kate, I want to talk more about the book, The Joy of Money, because you address this in the book, looking specifically about what money can actually do for us. I think Mirandy's made a point here that when she hears the idea of money, she feels quite anxious because she gets concerned about cash flow, paying bills, covering those costs that she has every month. And so I think that, Safia, you made a good point, is that confidence and education is a great way to help you feel like you are more on top of things, so you can then take steps to move forward. So Julia and Kate, can you just talk me through, when you were writing The Joy of Money, what were some of the things that you were hoping that people would get out of the book? Because I certainly wish that it was around when I was going through my money journey. Was it to make women feel more confident after reading it, to make women millionaires? Like, what was your sort of goal of writing this book?
Well, I guess
the primary thing was really around confidence for women. When we did the research for the book, and we interviewed over 100 individuals to understand what people's concerns were about money, one of the things that we identified was that women typically would step away from conversations around money, particularly if it got into things like share investing or ETFs, as you said before, Meggie. And people would say, oh, well, I don't feel comfortable with the language of money, or I don't feel comfortable with maths, is another thing that sometimes comes up. But our view is that you've got to take these small steps, these micro steps, to actually build your confidence. You've kind of got to, start taking some steps towards managing your money. And so the aim of the book was really to ensure that we explain things in a way that made it easier to take those small steps, and through experience that women could then build their confidence around money. So that was one of the key areas that we were aiming for. Julia?
Yeah, and with that
mountain, can't it? So Julia, yeah, go ahead, please.
So with the confidence, I had an example of this yesterday, that we think, women don't want to talk about money because you feel you might have made a mistake in the past, or that someone might think you're stupid because you don't understand the language, or you're not at the level that people around you are at, and you feel embarrassed about that. And this week, I've had plumbing issues at home, and I feel so lost, and I don't know, what to do and who to call first, and do you call the insurer or do you call the plumber, and so on. And, I just got so overwhelmed in it all that when I actually, told friends and said, I've had these issues, they were really sensible and said, well, you call this person, I know that person, and so on. And I thought, well, we want to get people talking about it and, looking up how you get through these things and getting more information, so that when you're confronted with issues, if they're financial, you have some sort of knowledge and you're able to have the confidence to have the conversations that will get you out of whatever issues you have.
And I think what you're saying is such a great point. And you make this point in the book. You talk about how if we're feeling depressed or we're having relationship issues, we see a therapist. If we're sick, we see a doctor. If we want to get healthy, we see a personal trainer. And yet, so many of us have this mental block for whatever reason that because we spend money all the time, we should know how to grow it. And so there's a block often that, and Kate, I think you speak about this in the book. There's a block that a lot of us have that, oh no, I'm too proud to get help. I don't, I've got this, but actually a lot of us don't got this on our own, do we? We need that help to kind of get the success we're looking for.
Yes, and I think the other danger is that we do the Dr. Google when it comes to finances, and there's an enormous amount of information that is available, and some of it's very good information. The challenge is translating it from good information to how you actually implement it that makes a difference for you personally. And I think this is where a lot of people they just get overwhelmed with it, and just understanding some of the simple steps that you can take that can make a significant difference. And that was very much a focus in the book, was to effectively step through the different things that people should consider, whether it's, saving through superannuation or investing, insurance. We talk a lot in the book about human capital, which I know, Meggie, is a topic close to your heart, and making sure that, you negotiate well for the role that you're in and that you get paid accordingly. So the idea in the book is to basically step people through effectively the steps that they could take to do a lot of the work themselves, but also the questions that they can ask if they do want to seek advice from a professional.
And I think we're getting a lot of great comments. Thank you to everyone, by the way, who is sharing their story. It's really kind of you, and we really appreciate your stories, because it's through your stories that we all learn. So thank you to everyone. And please send us questions. If you have questions for Kate, Julia or Safia, we are an open book, so you can ask us anything. And something that's coming through trend-wise in these questions is relationships and money. And Kate, you sort of touched on this at the start of the conversation. For people who have had relationships that have maybe ended and they feel like they're starting from scratch, it's a tough time, obviously, with COVID. People are just feeling very stressed. What is something that they can do this week? Like in terms of, if we think about one foot in front of another, you can't tackle everything overnight. What is one thing that they can do this week? Julia, I might go to you, and then Kate and Safia, I'll come to you as well.
I guess the first thing is to know what your position is, and to know what your assets are, what your income is, what your cash flow is, and what your outgoings are. And then from there, you can make decisions on where to go next. So I think a lot of people, you're not focused on money. It's something embarrassing or awkward or not joyful. And so you ignore it, where you should really get your positioning and then figure out what you can do next. So do you have enough cash flow to start saving some money and putting it into some sort of account before you get paid into your spending account? What position are you in with your insurance, and can you contribute a bit more to super and whatever? I think you've got to get the understanding of where you are today before you can make any plans of what to do next.
That's a great advice. So sort of take stock, sort of get everything in order, realize what you do have, what you don't have, and then you'll feel more confident to put.
And if you're in a relationship, you should still be aware, even if you're not the one managing the money, where is everything? Where's the debt? Do you know the extent of what your combined debt is, or, what your combined assets is? You should always know your position.
Great advice. Kate, I'll go to you next before coming back to Safia.
So building on what Julia's said, that taking stock is really important. And I noticed on some of the chat, there's some pretty challenging situations for people. And, and I think, the reality is that unfortunately for some of us in life, it does happen from time to time where we end up, in what I call the winter of your finances. My advice in that situation is you've got to find just one or two things that can make the biggest difference. And so, for example, I went through a really tough time when I came out of one of my relationships. I'd rented a house, and I realised that even though I'd done my cash flow, that there were some unexpected expenses. The divorce settlement was taking longer than I'd had anticipated. And I actually had to make a decision to rent a cheaper house. So I had to find somebody to sublet and take on the lease that I'd already taken on, and find somewhere that was in, you know, a less ideal location. And that was a really hard decision, but it was necessary for the time. And so, you know, that's just one example of, I suppose, you know, a small decision that made a big difference to my cash flow. I think the other thing is, if you're in a tough place, ask for help. You know, and that's something that I think as women, we're not often very good at doing. One of the things that Julia and I talk a lot about in the book is what we call the family bank. And the family bank doesn't mean that you go and get a gift from somebody else in the family, but it might mean that you ask, you know, a sibling or a parent just for a short-term loan to help you through. So I think, you know, they're probably just a couple of ideas of things that you can do to help you through if you're going through tough times.
That's so true, Kate. You're not alone. And I think a big part of the reason why Westpac has set up Ruby Connection is to create community, you know? And so I think it is, they really, the team are amazing. If you're not already a member, absolutely join up. We've popped the link in the resources and we'll pop it in again. But see us and see everyone on this call and see the future monthly webinars. See this as your community, you know, and there is support, there is resources, there are these webinars available to help support you. And Safia, I know Westpac are really great as well in the branches in terms of offering help and advice. That's what a lot of your team are there for.
That's right. And, you know, we are in unprecedented times, you know, so we do have to adapt and change. And that means, you know, changing the way we do things, even in our own personal circumstances. And, you know, it's a really good time. And I've really heard this a lot from a lot of our customers and a lot of our bankers as well, is that it's a time to reset. You know, it's a time to really revisit, you know, your financial circumstances and what does it mean for you now? Because everyone is going through some sort of change in their life, you know, whether it's adapting to a different workplace or, you know, whatever the case may be. But my advice to everyone is, you know, take that opportunity to really reset, review your current circumstances and see how you can try to save money or make your banking a lot more convenient for you. Because the way, and, you know, the things that we are finding at the moment is the way that we conduct our, you know, our banking is very different to how we conducted our banking years ago. You know, a lot more things are happening, a lot more self-service, and we've noticed that as well, you know, through customer behavior. So, you know, my advice is, you know, little tips that you can do is keep a money diary. You know, keep a diary of, you know, what's your ins and outs and, you know, how can you actually utilize, you know, what you're currently doing. There's different tips that you can use. And, you know, there's budgeting tools that are available to different cash flow videos as well that can really help you. And I think, you know, one thing that is a reminder to everyone is that we're all in it together. You know, so there may be someone in a similar position to you, but certainly, you know, exactly what Kate said is, you know, ask for help. You know, we're here to help you and your financial institution is really here to help. So anything that we can do, you know, we're all about people helping people. So, you know, reach out in need. You know, I think we've got some great tools. And, you know, one thing, Meggie, I will ask is, you know, to share the Davison Institute, because there's a lot of videos and helping tips and tools that you can use, you know, from money diaries to cash flows to budgeting and planning for your future, the kind of things that we've all talked about today. You know, and there's some really great visuals which you can use as well. So, you know, we'll share that with everyone today and hopefully you'll find that useful as well.
Absolutely. And I love this idea that you've all touched on is about, you know, creating community and trying to demystify some of these mindsets that we carry from childhood or poor relationships or from our parents and their money habits. Shattering those is sometimes a big part of the journey to getting towards finding money a joyful topic. One thing that I've observed in a lot of my friendship groups, a lot of the men in my life have like share group conversations. I'll meet up once a month to talk about stock picks or like, what are we investing in this year? And I realized a few years ago, I was like, I don't have one of those groups. Like, why don't I have a book club with my girlfriends about money? And so I've actually started that with my girlfriends where we now talk about this kind of stuff to try and demystify it. So the joy of money is obviously going to be our next topic. And so I would just encourage everyone on the call to don't see yourself as an island. We've had a lot of people message us privately into the group saying that they've had poor relationships. Don't isolate yourself. Surround yourself with cheerleaders who can help support you, whether that's friends, family, the bank, Ruby Connection women, whatever it is, because a problem shared is a problem halved, as we know. Before we take final questions, Julia and Kate, what is the one habit that you see of the most financially successful women that you know? What is the one thing that they do that has just, you know, made them be super, super successful in their money life?
I would say that they've earned more than they've spent. Really basic, but it makes a difference. And it doesn't matter how much you earn. You might be the highest earner out of your group of friends, but if you're not putting some of that aside and using it to invest for the future, then it doesn't really matter.
Simple but great.
And I think,
thank you. Kate?
and then on the flip side of that, I think the most successful women that I work with are the ones who are very clear on their own worth and they look after their human capital. So that's about making sure that they're skilling up, that they're attending to the income side of the equation, not just the expense side of the equation. Sometimes I talk about putting your man hat on, and it's a little bit like what you were talking about, Meggie, with the men having the clubs to talk about shares. The men are a lot better at navigating and being very deliberate about their career choices. And I think the women that I work with that make very, very good career decisions and look after the income side of the equation, there's a lot of upside in the human capital side of the equation. And so look after the expenses, as Julia said, make sure that you pay yourself first so that you save first, but make sure you look after the human capital side of the equation. Enormous upside.
So valuable. And Justine's asked an amazing question. Thank you, Justine, because I want to know the answer to this too. If you were going to make one investment to your future and it wasn't property and it wasn't superannuation, what would that be? Julia, I'm going to throw you in the deep end first on this one, and then Safia, I'll come to you.
Well, I think, you know, as you've just been talking about human capital, invest in yourself, whether it's for an education or, you know, building your profile somehow, or whatever course you need to do to get you to the next step. That's really important. And also, you know, what you were just saying about putting your man hat on, like make sure you have men in your group that's going to help you to understand how men think about things, and they will see your value in a different way than you might see your own value, and not be afraid to, you know, set your worth and your price when you're, you know, selling yourself. I think that's important.
That is really important. Kate, I'll ask you next.
So I'm going to answer it a little bit differently, and I'm going to talk about investing in asset. And the important point to make here is that a lot of people focus on investment returns, and you'll hear people, particularly the blokes around the barbecue, talking about the shares and the investment returns and that they made, you know, X on Westpac. The biggest leverage that you will get is through structuring tax effectively. So I know the question said outside of super, but in fact, super is simply a mechanism to invest that gives you incredible tax concessions. So you can invest, like contribute into super and get a tax concession when you put the money in. And then when the money's inside the superannuation environment, it's taxed at a much, much lower tax rate than for most of us, our marginal tax rate. So even though I know the question was worded outside of super, I would actually say, think more about those sorts of structural things, because they can have a bigger impact on your overall wealth than any choice of investment.
And on this idea of maximising the money that we have to invest and to save, obviously we're coming up to the end of financial year. It's been a bit of an unusual last 3 or 4 months. We've all been working from home a lot more, most of us, rather than at the office. I wonder if any of our panellists want to chime in our last few minutes with any sort of tips that you'd encourage people to think about when they're lodging their tax return or just thinking about end of financial year.
Well, the number one thing that we've been talking about at Money Magazine lately is just making sure that you're claiming for your working at home, and making sure that you're claiming on that special government shortcut of the 80 cents per hour that you work at home. Or if you think you can claim more, doing your actual calculations and making sure that you make that claim.
That's fabulous. I love that advice. It's so true. Keep track of all of your expenses. Make sure you keep those receipts. I know it's tedious, but put an email folder in your email if that's going to help you. I'm a big fan of automation. So whatever I can automate in terms of my savings or my investing or preparing for tax time, I love that. So if anyone is a nerd like me and wants to talk about automation, feel free to drop me a line on LinkedIn or on Instagram at PepTalkHer. I'm happy to talk about automation all day long. I want to be respectful of all of your time because I know that it's very valuable and precious. We're happy to hang around for another 5 minutes. If you have to go, thank you for joining us and thank you for your time. We will be circulating the resources and the top tips that everyone shared today in an email. And we are having these lunch and learn sessions every month. So a big thank you to Westpac and Ruby Connection for hosting us. And also to our fabulous panel. Obviously, make sure you check out the book, The Joy of Money. That'll help you get on the right track for getting your finances in order. It really breaks it down in a simple way for you. So thank you, Julia. Thank you, Kate. And Safia, you're a legend. Thank you for joining us. There's the book. Kate's holding up the book. Thank you, Kate. Yeah, keep it up there so everyone knows what to look for in the bookstore. It's not easy launching a book in these COVID times, so we're grateful to these ladies for joining us. If anyone has final questions, as I said, we're happy to take 1 or 2 final questions. I'm just going to quickly scroll through. Here we go. Lisa's had some great advice here. If it's in business, invest in your business for the growth opportunities. Really great advice there. And thank you to Leanne and Lisa and everyone who's messaging us for that. That's awesome. If you're wanting to make sure that you maximize the personal capital that Julia, Kate and Safia all talked about in terms of pay raises, that's a big part of what we work on at PepTalkHer. The app that we have is free, so you can download that on Apple or Android if you want to help keep track of your successes. And I could talk about this negotiating stuff all day long. So again, just DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn if we can help support you with that, because I'm so passionate about making sure that all of you can retire in the way that you would love to, regardless of the ups and downs that we've had throughout our lives. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. I think we will wrap it up, and we are so excited to see you all again in another 4 weeks' time. Do we have any dogs on the call today? I know we did last time. We had a few people hold up their puppies. So if you've got your puppy with you, please hold it up so we can see how cute your dog is. We have had a great message here from Sarah. She's just really thrilled that we're talking about money. I love this concept of being comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. And I think often as women, for a variety of different reasons, we feel uncomfortable talking about money. So I'm grateful to Ruby Connection for creating a safe space for us to have these conversations and to share some really vulnerable stuff about the highs and lows. And I think, Julia, was it you who said that it's the winter of your finances, or was that you, Kate?
Kate.
I can't remember.
Kate.
That was Kate. Yeah, I love that. But I think as well, if you're going through a winter in terms of your money, I think if you can put one foot in front of the other, I'm hopeful that you'll be able to get to spring and summer as well. So please keep us posted on how you go on your money journey. We would love to hear from you. And we will very much look forward to seeing you all again in a month. But a big thank you again to our panelists, Safia, Julia and Kate. You can check out the book, The Joy of Money. It's online on Booktopia, independent bookstores, the big bookstores, online, Kindle, all of those good fun things. And if you haven't already, please make sure that you sign up for Ruby Connection so that we can keep you posted for the next sessions as well. Have a wonderful weekend. Good luck preparing your taxes. Tax time is near, and we will see you all again in a month. Thanks, panel. You've been amazing.